or seal or. Going to the tax rate page. Can we take a peek?
I was hoping somebody was telling me that I tried to get it and take that. It's all about I don't even know what it is. I can't remember. All right, thanks. It is go time.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to May 6th, 2024 City Council Work Session. I'd like to ask that everyone, including the city manager, presently come inside all electronic devices. At this time, we'll move right into our agenda. Item A, Go Bond referendum discussion. We've got Peggy Reese, our Chief Financial Officer, and Ted Cole, Davenport Public Finance.
Mayor and Council, it's an honor to be before you tonight, and also an honor to introduce to you Ted Cole, the Davenport Financial Advisors, and he will be going over the GO bonds with the items that Council wanted to have on the referendum this fall. And at the end, there will be a calendar with the first action that Council will need to take will be a resolution to vote on May 21st council meeting or to go to file the application with the LBC, and I'll turn it over to Scott.
All right, well, good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. If there are any questions, please stop me along the way. I believe you all have a hard copy of this. It should be exactly what's on the screen, and there are page numbers in the bottom right corner. So we'll go through this. We're not looking for any action this evening, just a briefing. And as Peggy said, we'll talk about the next steps at the end. This will be relatively short and sweet. In working with staff, I'm on page 2. What's been identified at this point related to a potential bond referendum is 2 primary purposes. Parks and Recreation, I'm on the left-hand margin, that is made up of 3 projects. Maynard Aquatic Center, Paramount Theater, and Western Sportsplex. Combined for Parks and Rec, what's being discussed is a total of $42 million that would be put to the voters for approval. And then a separate question, streets and sidewalks, 15 for resurfacing, parking lots, $1.5 million sidewalk, $5 million for downtown streetscapes. So we're 21.5, put the 2 together, $63.5 million, but they will be 2 separate and distinct questions on the ballot, and one or the other or both can be approved. They are not contingent on one another. They're 2 separate and distinct questions. The laws surrounding general obligation bond referendums has been evolving over the last few years. The ballot questions have gotten a bit longer and more informational. You'll see there's some blanks in there. But this was a draft put together by the bond attorney, so I think it's going to look largely like this, but we will ultimately fill in those blanks, and you'll see those. But what the blanks are getting to, and these are relatively new concepts, is using, I'm on, I guess, number 1 there, the estimated cumulative cost over the life of the bonds using the highest interest rate charged for a similar debt over the last 20 years would be blank. So that's principal plus interest that will be dropped in there. And then they'll restate that that is the principal plus blank in interest. They want to be very transparent as to how much interest will be paid on these bonds over the life of the bonds. And most of these, as we've noted there, we would expect to be issued over a 20-year term. That's really going to be the max. If we got to a place and you wanted to issue something over a shorter period, you certainly could, but 20 years is the typical for these, the term that the LGC would be most comfortable with, and that's what the math will be based on. The interest rate will be given to us by the Local Government Commission, and that rate that they provided is 5.344. It's a very specific rate, and that is them at the Local Government Commission going back and looking at GO bonds for local governments over the last 20 years and identifying that highest interest rate. And that's where they have landed as the rate to publish. The reality, today you might be at 375. In our planning work, we've been using 5%. But their guidance would be this very specific rate of 5.344. So ultimately, that's all going to get filled in. But key to all of that math will be 42 million, is that where we land, and the 21.5. But those questions would be virtually identical, just different interest expense because they're different amounts. But that is what the voters would see. And as I said, one is not contingent on the other. Any questions on that? Okay. The planning work that we've done with staff on page 3, and this gets to the plan of finance. That is, if these bonds are approved, when will we issue them? What's the timing? How does it fit into the city's debt profile and debt budget? This is not set in stone. You won't be beholden to this, but it's the basis of the plan. And so we've assumed there'll be 2 bond issuances, one in 2025 and one in 2027. And you'll see the lighter green, or the green, is what we would expect to be in the first bond issue, and that would be $38.5 million. And you'll see it's made up of about 17 of Parks and Rec and 21.5 of Streets and Sidewalks. Those can be sold together when the time comes. They're 2 separate votes, but if they're both approved, we can sell them together. And so we're expecting or planning for a $38.5 million issuance in the spring of 25. That would be roughly 6 months after the referendum. So presumably the bonds are approved, and then we are moving right into the issuance cycle for the first 38.5, and then the expectation would be in early calendar year 27, we would issue the remaining $25 million, which would be tied to the Western Sportsplex. That's the plan. Something could accelerate, something could slow down. Just because the bonds are approved by the voters doesn't mean they have to be issued. They could go unissued, and the approval just lapses from the voters. So, best estimate of the timing, and that's what's going to drive some other results that I'm going to show you here. That is, how do we pay for this? And we're assuming that that is the schedule that these bonds are issued. But again, you'll have, from the date of the referendum, you'll have 7 years to issue the debt. If you can't get them issued in 7 years, you can request a 3-year extension from the Local Government Commission. That's usually a non-issue. They'll give you 3 years. And just because they're approved doesn't mean they have to be issued. Things could change in the future where the authorization could lapse. Any questions on that? All right. Okay, page 4. What we've done here is, this is a continuation of the plan, and we're showing what, particularly in the upper left, what the new debt profile of the city would look like. The very dark green is the debt that's outstanding today, and you can see it's fairly small, right? It's less than $2 million a year of debt service. You've only got about $15 million of debt outstanding. That's tax supported. Not talking about water sewer, just tax supported debt. The lighter green is the expectation that we're going to issue that 2025 bond, right? So the debt profile changes. The blue is the expectation that we'll issue the 27 bond, and then that grayish color is the expectation that you'll do these annual leases, vehicles, and equipment that you do every year. So it just kind of shows you the progression over time of how the city's debt profile will change, and you'll see the very dark green, right? It's about $1 million a year of debt service. Well, you can see over the next 4 or so years, the annual payment could be getting closer to $10 million a year. And that's a function of the referendum, if it's approved, and if you issue the full amount, plus the fact that you issue some shorter term debt most every year for equipment, vehicles, things like that. On the right-hand side, the very top, we're just restating for you, this is the amount of tax-supported debt outstanding, a little over $15 million. It's where we are today. We're then saying, okay, we're going to assume there's 38.5 issued in 25 for the GOs, another 25 million issued in 27. So that would be the 63.5 million of principal, right? That's how much the voters would have approved. The bold number, 99 million, that is the total payback over the term of the debt, principal plus interest. So you're borrowing 63.5 million over 20 years at that 5.344%, the total payback of principal and interest would be a little over 99 million. So that is one of the numbers that will get referenced in those ballot questions. As I said earlier, today you'd be at a 375, so you would be less than that, but for the purposes of this process with the referendum, the Local Government Commission wants to use that historically highest figure in the interest rate, and that's just sort of how the process works. So I'd like to call it maybe the worst case scenario. I mean, you never know. Rates, nothing to say rates couldn't go above the historic highs, but we're well below that 5.3 right now, and getting up to that level would be a major market movement. But nonetheless, that's the approach, and again, 20 years at 5.3%. Okay? So the first question we asked, and I know there's a lot going on in this chart, but I think I can make it pretty simple, is does the city have the capacity to do this? And what I mean by the capacity is within debt ratios, financial policies, generally accepted levels of debt for a highly rated local government city in North Carolina, a AA city. Do we have the capacity? I mean, is this a realistic conversation to be having to potentially issue $63 million a day? And the answer is yes, the capacity is there. You have very low levels of debt right now. You've been very prudent in the approach of issuing debt. You're not over leveraged. So within certain ratios and measurements that the Local Government Commission would look at, the bond rating agencies would look at, you have capacity to take on this kind of debt. And all of these lines are showing you that post-issuing the debt, after the fact, you still are going to look very similar and in line with other AA and AAA rated local governments. The dotted lines show you the kind of the min and the max for every ratio. Let me just talk about the upper right. Debt to assessed value, the amount of debt outstanding as a percent of your tax base. Right now in the dark green, you are well below 1%, right? You don't have a lot of debt. By the time we issue these GOs, that's the lighter green, and we're getting up to, looks like it might be 0.75%. We're still under 1%. The average for the AAAs and AAs are those solid lines, 0.5 to 0.75, but the dotted lines are the min and the max for those double and triple. So it's a very wide range that you would see for highly rated communities in North Carolina for debt to assessed value. You are really close to the medians or the average, and again, that helps us in terms of making this statement. There is the capacity there to do this. That should not be a question in y'all's minds whatsoever. And the other two graphs are just other ratios that are telling us the same thing, the capacity there. That's not an issue. So what we want to talk about is the affordability. And this is the page 6, and I'm going to focus on column C. Column C is where we assume that historically high-end rate of 5.3%. And again, we're talking about issuing, under the plan, 38.5 million of these GOs in 25, 25 million of them in 27, for the full 63.5. We then go down and we show how these three debt ratios would fall out. And as I stated earlier, they look fine. There's no question your debt profile is going to grow. It's going up, right? You've only got 15 million now when we're talking about issuing 63. But even with that new debt, you're going to have a profile that is very consistent with highly rated local governments. So the capacity, the ratios, not a concern. The bottom half of this is saying, okay, we will need, as a city, we will need to bring in some new revenue to the debt model to pay for this, right? We're issuing this debt, we have annual payments starting. What is the affordability? And what we've done, beginning on line 14, is by fiscal year, we have measured the equivalent number of pennies on the tax rate needed to generate the revenue to repay the debt. And keep in mind, right now, each penny on your tax rate generates about $770,000, right? So every penny, $770,000. So under this plan, what we're saying is, as you move forward with the issuance, in 2026, so not the budget you're working on now, but next year's budget, you would need the equivalent of about 4.7 pennies worth of revenue to service the debt. Next year, you wouldn't need any additional revenue. The next couple of years, you need around 1.5 pennies. So all told, over about a 4-year period, you all would need to recognize and identify, I'm going to round up slightly, about 6.5 pennies worth of revenue. That does not mean you have to raise the taxes to do it. We just equate it to pennies on the tax rate because it's a meaningful benchmark. But it's the equivalent of 6.5 pennies worth of revenue that would be needed. But again, it would happen between fiscal year 26 and 29, not all at once. So there are a lot of things that are going to evolve over that period of time that may allow you to outperform, or other things you'll have to deal with that will change this impact. It's our best estimate of what might happen using that higher interest rate. If the debt is issued a little bit later, the impact could be lower. If we get a better interest rate, the impact could be lower. You find yourselves in a growth mode with better revenues. You might already have the revenue in your budget to service some or all of that debt. So I don't want to leave you that will require a tax rate increase. It is simply a way to estimate or communicate the dollars amounts that are needed. The alternative at the very bottom would be, rather than do it over time here or there, you could fully fund this program by doing a one-time adjustment in the rate or identifying the equivalent revenues of a little over 5.5 pennies in the 2026 budget. So it's just two ways to get to the same place. That is, we need a certain amount of new revenue into the debt model to facilitate this. And it's going to be somewhere between 5.5 and 6.5 pennies worth of revenue over the next 1 to 4 years. And there are a number of things that are going to influence that. And we'll deal with that on a budget by budget basis. But these are some things that are going to be put out in the public, obviously this evening, but going forward in the process, so that people understand the potential impact of doing the referendum. Okay? And remember, we're doing this on a combined basis, both questions. But ultimately, in the ballots, they're going to look at the streets and sidewalks versus the parks and recs separately. We've done it on a combined basis, as if both were approved and all of the debt was issued. And then we've just simply said, well, what does the same impact look like if we were to get lower rates? And we went all the way down to 4%. So you can see it shaves off almost a penny's worth of, impact, depending on what the rate is. But the guidance received from the LGC is, for a number of reasons and in different parts of this process, using that column C, and they call it a safe harbor interest rate assumption. They're not going to question your assumptions and putting this all together if you're using that interest rate. Okay, so this gets to the affordability. There are going to need to be some additional revenues brought into the debt budget, and again, this gives you a benchmark to measure that. All right, any questions on that?
Any questions?
All right, last slide. This is the overall schedule going forward, and as Peggy alluded earlier, May 21, that is the official kickoff, if you will, of y'all's action. We've got basically 3 different meetings here, May 21, June 18th, and July 16th. Very specific dates of these things having to happen in a sequence, and certain things have to be advertised and action has to be taken. The attorneys largely drive that schedule, following statutes and making sure that everything gets ultimately to the registrar or Board of Elections by the certain deadlines, so that ballots can be properly printed and it's done in time for early voting and all those sorts of things. So the statutes are pretty prescriptive as to what happens, but staff and ourselves and the attorneys will help guide through all of these actions necessary. But this is big picture, all rolling up to November 5th would be the referendum. You'll notice almost at the bottom, the local government commission is the last to approve it. So we've got to submit an application to them early in the process. Pretty straightforward application. They accept it and say it looks good. That's the staff at the LGC. But the commission itself, this is a relatively new approach, they don't want to approve your application until after the referendum. They felt like that is a better sequence because they don't give anybody the perception of approving the projects or the vote or anything about it. They want to approve it now after the referendum, assuming it passes. And for that reason, they've given us the guidance of using those interest rates and whatnot, right? Because you can imagine if the voters approve it, but the LGC doesn't like the way you've communicated the impact, then you're sort of at cross purposes. The voters have approved it, the LGC doesn't want to approve it because they have a concern. So purposely they've said, we're going to approve it after the referendum, and to ensure that that happens seamlessly, here are some assumptions we want you to use in your planning. So that's where some of those interest rate assumptions come from, and some of the disclosures that they're going to want to see along the way. Okay? That's all the slides we had. Are there any questions?
The only question that I have, and obviously some of our, take the Sportsplex, that we did a study a few years back and we sort of based our model on that. And that number may not be 100% where it needs to be. In addition, the YMCA's reached out to me and I had a brief meeting with them. they want to be part of the collaborative process on that because they've got to do something with their facility in addition to, and be sure that we're not duplicating. So obviously, there's got to be, and maybe there could be some shared uses, and that's subject for another day. But the final dollar amount that we've got to plug in for this thing for the sportsplex, and that timeline up there, when does that have to be?
There is,
Are we set now, or is there?
on the May 21st resolution, you have to state the purposes, so presumably streets and sidewalks, and what was the other? Parks and Rec? Parks and Rec. And an amount that is, can go down but not up.
Okay.
So it's a not to exceed amount. But you can come down later in the process,
Okay.
but you cannot go up without starting over.
Now, if that facility is advertised, and then when it comes in for bid, it's, let's say, 30 to 35 million. Then the option you have is to rebid it, scale it down. Well, then could the city itself add additional money to that from other debt service options to the 25 million approved in bond package? Would that be legal?
Yes, absolutely. I see it quite often, you can imagine. Your bonds are good for 7 years and things happen with project costs, so it's not uncommon. People issue the GOs they were authorized to issue, they might contribute cash or they do a different type of debt to supplement. Not a problem.
Any other questions?
So we're all good to see the preliminary findings on the 21st.
Yeah. I mean, to Harold's point, I think I'm good with leaving it like it is because this thing's going to be a moving target as we go down the road anyway. And if there is some staff discussion with the YMCA board and there could be some economies at scale, then that would help us. So. All right, our next item, item B, Paramount Expansion Project Design Update. I think we've got Nolan Hertman and Bonnie. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So I guess this is one of your bond projects, given a kind of check-in with council. We've been working through the design development phase, DD phase. Kind of at the end of that, we've got enough design done that we've got a new estimate in. So that's really what we're here to do this evening. And so Montana's here, Fred Patrick's here, our project manager, and also Eric Kirshner and Morgan Meister. We've all been working on this hand in hand. And then Montana has a whole team of engineers and design people that are steady at it. So this is what we're doing tonight. That's our background. We're going to do the update, estimate, and then talk about next steps. This is really just for your reference. We've gone through just kind of keeping this up to date as we go through time. This is something you can point back to. I won't read all that to you, but just gives you a history of how we got here. So I'm going to turn it over to Montana here, and I'll run these slides for you.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So we're going to go through kind of design update, showing you update to the renderings as well as some of the proposed materials and products that we'll be using for the facility. We're at the end of design development phase and getting input and feedback before we go into the construction operating phase. So this rendering should be very familiar to you, very familiar, similar to the SD phase. The only change and update that we've made is the corner entry. During the SD phase, we had a recessed entry with a direct entrance into the first floor multi-purpose space, but we have eliminated that, pulled the wall out so that we can gain more usable area within the space, which would be very helpful with the different events and programming Other than that, we also, in the far right corner, added perforated screens to screen the mechanical units. But other than that, it's very similar to the SD base. These are floor plans of the facility. On the far left is the first floor multi-purpose room with restroom facility. There's elevator and entrance. The main entrance to the facility will be on Spring Street, which is on the upper part of the slide. And then on the second floor, again, we have a large multi-purpose room with some administrative space, offices, a catering staging area, and restrooms, stairs and elevator. And then we also have a third level, which is the occupable roof deck for events on the roof deck level. And then we also have catering staging area, some storage units, storage rooms. This is just a real diagrammatic elevation of the facility showing the added screening around the mechanical units on the one-story building, where the design is being developed, so it's very generic elevation right now.
Okay.
And the canopy, yes. So we're proposing to extend the canopy all the way across to provide more coverage for folks that are parking in the parking lot as they approach to the building. So this is a rendered elevation of that view right there. And the entrance is off of Spring Street. We have also designed a stage right addition behind the theater, which with the added a larger dressing room facility with restrooms, as well as kind of a backstage area for performers to come through. And then there's a crossover space behind the theater to allow better circulation, which is lacking currently, and that really improves the kind of performers' circulation path. This is just showing a quick overview of the materials which we've discussed during the SD phase. The existing theater has a brick facade with precast detail elements. The new addition, the new building will have fiber cement panels, which are it's kind of like compressed concrete boards, very thin concrete boards, as the major facade, a wall material. And the colors are very compatible with the theater. Not kind of a compatible color, but the theater will stand out as a more prominent historic building with the contrast of the color. The storefront material, the addition will have a lot of glazing. So the glazing will have dark bronze finish that you see on the left. And then inside the multi-purpose spaces will have roller shades to control the sun and glare, and also provide blackout for programming that require that function, with movies or other type of programming that requires a blackout function. This is on the roof deck level. On the left image, we're going to have composite wood decking on pedestals, which will allow us to run conduits underneath to run power and lighting on the roof deck level. On the right image is perforated metal panels. We're proposing to use some kind of perforated metal panels. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be gray. It could be color, pre-finished color. There's lots of pre-finished color options. So we'll be definitely studying color options, but it'll be some kind of perforated panel to screen the mechanical units on the roof. Moving inside, this is proposed materials for the main stair going up to the upper level. The proposed tread and riser material will be terrazzo, which is very durable, low maintenance material. And then for the handrails will be a combination of steel with wood handrail. The design intent is that the stair will be very light and elegant and kind of with nice finishes. This is an image of the secondary stairs, emergency exit stairs. The image on the left is the exit stairs from the second floor up to the roof deck and out. And the image on the right is the exterior exit stairs across the roof deck. tread and riser. And all of the steel components outside will be galvanized. We'll have galvanized finish, which provides a very long-lasting finish and low maintenance. Going back on the inside, looking at ceiling and floor finishes, for the first floor multi-purpose room, we're proposing a wood slat ceiling with acoustic infill above it, so it'll be acoustically treated. The first floor multi-purpose room will have a lot of access, visual access to the street, to the sidewalks and street elevation. So we wanted a nice kind of warm wood ceiling material. On the second floor multi-purpose room, we're proposing some kind of pipe grid to provide flexibility in locating light fixtures for events that can benefit from that kind of flexibility. And throughout the facility, we'll also have acoustic ceiling tiles throughout the first floor and second floor, kind of circulation space, restroom facilities. We do have two proposed, or two options for flooring in addition. The first one is concrete slab, a stained concrete finish throughout the facility. The concrete finish is a very durable, low maintenance material. The only downside with concrete is that there may be some cracks throughout the concrete floor. That's just the nature of the concrete material. The second option is the use of luxury vinyl planks throughout the facility. With a luxury vinyl plank, there are a lot of different look options. It could look like wood, it could look like concrete, it could look like other materials. It can mimic a lot of different materials, and there are a lot of color options. So we would like to have council feedback on the preference as far as flooring throughout the facility.
Maybe
We can discuss that at the question
process
and
that
answer.
and talk about it again at the end, like some feedback.
Looking at wall finishes for the restroom, the image on the left, this is kind of an inspirational image for the restroom facility. Proposed porcelain tile floor, porcelain tile wall with large mirror and solid surface countertops, and kind of a nice finish on the toilet partitions. For the multi-purpose rooms, we will have acoustic wall panels to again help improve the acoustics in the spaces. The panels will be not necessarily arranged in that format, but it's going to be applied to the wall surfaces to improve the acoustics in the rooms.
So let's sit on the design update. Any questions on any of that before we get into the updated numbers? All right, so I'll run through these real quick. The expansion portion is the new structure. You can see front addition, rear addition, site work. Some of the site work was things that had to get added. That's 6.5. The existing theater improvements are either performance upgrades that we talked about last time, or the renovation, which includes some of the integration we talked about. But also we've added some things like extending the canopy, the screening, things of that nature, and a few other additions. So that's 4.3 total there. So that gets you to your construction contingency. We do have, total construction, so we do have a design contingency built in right now. As we get through contract documents, we'll see how if that's needed or not with that final estimate, but we did build in some design contingency at this point, and then obviously you've got construction contingency. And to try to show you total project costs, something we haven't talked about in the past, but it's always something you need to have is your FF&E and special testing. So that's what the light purple there is, just so you can have the total numbers. So we're right at 13. You've got the current funding from the state, right at $1 million. So that puts our total project costs at about 12.2. It could be less if that design contingency isn't needed. That's what's in light gray over to the right. But we're kind of hitting our target somewhat. We're certainly up a little bit, but I wanted everybody to see kind of where we are at this point. Now that we have a little bit better numbers to look at.
What is the purpose of the design contingency? I've never heard of that.
schematic design, do the design development. When the project is not detailed yet, there are lots of things that the cost estimator may not pick up because it's not drawn in the drawings. So that's what a design contingency is for, is to cover the elements that are not included in the drawing yet. So once we get through the construction documents, everything will be detailed. So the design contingency, we wouldn't need the design contingency. The numbers would be, kind of solid.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, question on that. So, next steps, make sure we're heading in the right direction before we go into contract documentation phase, construction documents. And our schedule would be, by the fall, late summer, fall, to have everything ready to bid. We'll have a final estimate. We can do another check-in with you to make sure you know where we are. And then we'll be looking for direction after potential bond, however that plays out. And then, first quarter 25 is probably late there quarter. You can probably start construction with a little over a year and a half completion for construction. So, and as Todd will get into this later, we're trying to time this as best we can with the downtown streetscape project.
And how does this timeline work? We have a deadline to spend the money that's already allocated by the state.
Yeah. So he's going to have to issue his in 2 tranches there, but go ahead.
Yeah, so we will do the issuance of the water and sewer sections, which right now that is to be under contract by the end of this year. And then we can focus on the areas in which that is constructed so that we're following up streetscape and Paramount projects kind of feeding back together, following behind that, which will be spring of 2025.
So that's what we have for an update. Try to keep it short. Any questions? We would like some feedback on the flooring. We did feel like that was kind of a bigger decision. We've got LVP budgeted right now. There's a little bit of savings with the same concrete. It's just one of those things. Have preferences.
It appears to me, based on my experience, that the engineered flooring that we could get to put in there that would create a look or a feel, it's going to be just as durable, and it doesn't look like we didn't quite finish the project.
Yeah, the concrete has more of a industrial look, and the LVP is more refined look.
And the staining element of concrete on the interior is not an issue, but some of that gives a little trouble. What's everybody's thoughts on that? If you guys need direction on that, we should move forward.
I agree. I think the concrete, the wall not quite done.
Yeah.
Something else needs to be put in here.
Yeah.
And I would think the other option is somewhat more comfortable for people to stand in considerable amount of time also.
The plan would be too.
Right. Thank you. Next, item C is the consolidated plan for FY '24 through '28, our annual action plan for FY '24 through '25 regarding our CDBG program. This time we'll recognize Mike Blake. And keep it here.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Once we get up and rolling here, and I get out of the way, what we're going to be talking about is we have a community development block grant program here at the city. We've had it since about 1974, 75. Every 5 years, you have to do what's called a consolidated plan. That consolidated plan is supposed to give some demographic information, data, housing information, substandard housing information, as well as delineate for the next 5 years what kind of projects are eligible in the annual plans that we do. The first slide. So, again, identify and prioritize housing community development needs, set 5-year goals for each grant, or just under $500,000 a year. I want to make one quick comment. We do not know what this annual allocation is. We're not, HUD says we'll know by May 8th, which is Wednesday. Maybe, maybe not. It shouldn't change dramatically from what the prior year was, but if it does, we would have to then come back and possibly change the allocation somewhat. But I don't foresee that happening. And then the annual action plan is basically every year, even though you've got the grant as entitlements, there's an application submitted. That's generally submitted around the middle of May. Technically, we have until August 16th to get these plans actually submitted, but I always try to get these done in the middle of May. That's why we're having this meeting right now. And basically, the annual action plan pulls off of goals and strategies that were in the 5-year plan. So the 5-year plan didn't say it didn't have housing rehabilitation in it. Guess what? The annual plan can't have housing rehabilitation in it. But it does, so that's why it basically authorizes the annual plans to go forward for the next 5 years. And basically, you know, we talked about different funds. The CDBG within the city is pretty limited, but when it comes to rehab, for instance, it does work very cooperatively with our weatherization program, PTRC, with other programs that are in the county that we administer and other folks may administer. And the 2024-25 annual action plan is the first year of the new consolidated plan. Next slide. We actually had a really good citizen participation turnout. We had 2 meetings that were done earlier that had 6 to 15 folks, 10 or 6. And then we're asked to do a 3rd meeting where we had almost 30 people show up. There was a lot of good feedback from that. We had a survey that went out back in February that has just under 100 responses to it. And the comment period doesn't necessarily coincide with May 7th, but that's the last day of any comments that are being made on the plan, essentially. So, one thing I guess mention right now, as a part of the 3rd meeting that we had, there were some comments made about where sidewalks go, we pay for CDBG infrastructure. And Nolan actually had a really good idea, and part of this annual plan that's coming up has $100,000 set aside for that type of infrastructure, but we're going to try to, there's a lot of people that showed up to our meetings. We have their contact information. We will reach out to them and say, hey, where do you need this public safety installed? Where can a sidewalk go that meets very specific local needs within the community? So hopefully we can get that done in June so we can get that rolling quickly in the fall.
Regarding sidewalks, and I read that in there, that is to be determined based on community input. We've got a plan, but then as a 3rd piece, so the community input piece, we've got a plan, but then there's a 3rd piece that I've been a little concerned about, and it is how are we looking from a PD standpoint, public safety? Are there areas that just for statistical safety improvements that we need to look at sidewalks? And I'll give you an example that comes to top of brain. I get concerned every time I see individuals walking from the Brittany Apartments to Walmart. And there's a lot of refugees that are being housed there now. A lot of those people are walking to Walmart with families, and it is the most dangerous thing I've ever witnessed. So, is there going to be a safety element that staff or PD has some input and says, this is an area that we're concerned about?
So I know our pedestrian plan, Mike can speak to this more, had a lot of different metrics. And you've got scored, so many points for each metric, and they gave you a total score. And safety, pedestrian accidents, things of that nature was part of that. Now that probably needs to be updated because it's been a while since we did the PID plan. And I like the concept of what you're talking about. So if PD knows of something and they've got some information, let us know. That's how we do streetlights too. We've got a standard for streetlights, but if there's an area, you know, where there's a high crime rate or whatever, then we can add additional lighting based upon that. So that would be good information. And we can coordinate with chief to try to get some of that information. And maybe all that combined with this public input, we kind of narrow it down to what makes the most sense. You get as much as you can for what we got budgeted.
Pedestrian safety is a big part of any CDBG sidewalk project that we've done, crosswalks, things like that. This is to basically provide access for pedestrians to safely cross any of the roadways or crosswalks that are there. But I think that's a good idea, and we can work with staff to refine that process. Next slide, please. So, you know, in the comments, we did receive a lot of comments, and I think it was mostly positive. I mean, I think, you know, need more housing rehab, youth and senior services, food banks and pantries, and then public improvements again, sidewalks, lighting, ADA accessibility. You know, there are some things that CDBG funds can be used to facilitate, and other things that are just beyond the scope of what $500,000 grant per year can do. So, you know, I think that going forward, we try to make sure that we address the things that we can address with the funding that's available. Can we go to the next slide, please? And just to try to clear this up so it's not too confusing, because everything that's involved with CDBG and HUD can be very confusing, and I know that. This is a 5-year plan, 24 to 28. That's 4 years, but it's 5 years. Action plan, year 1, action plan, year 2, 3, 4, 5. Action plan 1 is in the consolidated plan. So normally they're standalone plans, they're submitted. The first year, the consolidated plan includes the first year annual plan that will be associated with it. So we can go to the next one, please. This is just for an example. You've got the green boxes are basically low to moderate block groups, census block groups. If you look at the projects that have happened over the last few years, they are concentrated generally in that area. So, you know, housing rehabilitation doesn't have to be though, because if you have a low-income homeowner that's anywhere in the city, they can be served. But when it comes to sidewalks, things like that, that has to be in low to moderate income areas for area benefits. So, any questions about that or how these have happened over the years? Probably not. Okay, next slide. All right, so when you look at this, you have the grant of $470,000. That was last year's grant. That's what we're working with, and we do not know what the grant will be for this new current year that starts July 1st. It will probably be around that amount. There's the administration of 20%, public services of $70,000, and then we have also program income. This comes from jobs that were done years ago sometimes. When somebody sells a house and in rehab, all of a sudden Lee or somebody in planning gets checked for, you know, whatever that loan amount was. So we have about $100,000 of program income a year. Right now it's built up. Most of that program income we have dedicated towards rehabilitation, because that's a good, quick way to get the money out the door and help people who need the assistance. Relocation assistance. The infrastructure line that you see there is sidewalks, parks, things of that nature, low to moderate income areas. And then the other activity of $15,000 is specific to the new community land trust to help with technical assistance and capacity building. So when you look at the total budget, it's a lot more than that 470, but that's mostly from the program income and then from projects that were funded in the past may not have spent the entire amount that was funded for. So let's say you did $100,000 for a sidewalk and it came in at 75. Now you got $75,000 that goes back in the pocket. So that's where that previous EN entitlement available, that's where that number comes from. So anybody have any questions about what you're looking at this slide? Okay, great. Next slide, please. Admin, again, that is basically the consolidated plan that you've got. That's the annual plan. That's the everything that we federal system for the city, as well as any consultants or other needs that arise that are not project related. Next slide. So residential rehab, I don't know if everybody's familiar with it, but if you have a person that's under 80% of your AMI or adjusted median family income, that we can basically do things like roofs and HVAC and other things, and help people stay in their homes longer. A lot of, probably over 50% or over 60, fixed incomes, and help them stay in their homes longer. There's always a wait list, because houses are always getting older. A house that didn't need 5 years ago needs it now, and so on and so forth. But, you know, it's, I think there are at least 20 on the applicant list right now. There are a couple, maybe 50 to 70 that are on the weatherization wait list in Alamance County, most of which are in Burlington. So there's always, we share the applicants, we share and try and bring resources towards these homeowners. Next slide, please. Okay, relocation is if, let's say, we're rehabbing somebody's house and it's going to, you know, the bathroom's not going to work for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They can come and actually, this can pay for the relocation while all the work is being done on the home. Next slide. All right, public services are capped at 15% of the annual grant plus 15% of the new program income of the year before, which don't forget I just said that because it confuses everybody. But basically we had over $180,000 worth of applications made for $70,000 worth of funding. So we came up with a process of basically capping everything at $15,000 that came in, then basically dividing everything by 0.53, which brought all the projects within that $70,000. And it was as equitable as we could do with the applications that we got. We got a lot more requests than we had funding in. Does anybody have any questions about any projects or any organizations? No? All right, next slide. And then for infrastructure, very similar to a typical year that we have here over the last few years since we've helped out with the program with the city. You know, so does anybody have any questions about any of those? I don't want to read them all out, but anything specific? That sidewalk there, that bottom line, is that based upon public input, that's $100,000 that came from the public meetings, which, again, Nolan had the idea of setting that aside for community input on where that goes. Next slide, please. And then I mentioned the technical assistance. Basically, that's an eligible activity to where a CDBG program can help a nonprofit build their capacity. And what the Burlington Land Trust is trying to do is to get moving so they can start buying property and start actually creating a land trust. You have to buy it, you have to rehab the property, and you create a ownership model that's part of community land trusts. So Durham has a great program, Chapel Hill has a great program, Davidson does, Burlington I think will probably in the next few years also be considered one of those great programs. So, next. All right, so I mentioned this earlier, and this kind of goes to, you know, the home program, which the city of Burlington and Alamance County were a part of for years, paid for generally rehabilitation and occasionally with single-family home purchases with one of the nonprofits here in town. That, since that broke up, that consortium, you know, this is what we can help people with. Other repair programs, I mentioned the weatherization program, the PTRC has that in 8 counties, including Alamance. Basically the same eligibility, except we can do rentals with weatherization, where you can't do rental house with the GSFR, which is the Housing Finance Agency. That's only homeowner occupied. So you've got, and also the city also received an urgent repair program grant this year too, which will get underway in the next year. And I can tell you, it's taken a long time, but the PTRC staff is working with the city staff a lot on these projects now, where we're getting, it's not always easy to make the funds work together because they have different eligibilities, they have different requirements, but we're trying to work that through where we bring the most resources to applicants inside the city that we can. Is that our last slide?
Questions? Any questions?
And what we're, I guess, asking for is that basically what we have recommended for the amounts and for the projects that council is okay with, that we will then take and put into the plan and submit once it's approved.
Got a quick question there. On that 15% public services.
Yes.
How was that determined?
HUD,
That's a max? Or-
basically, it's 15% of the entitlement of any year, so 15% of 470. Also, up to 15% of the program income from the prior year could be set aside for that, same with admin and other projects.
Right.
But what happened is we did have, we did fund a lot of different projects over the last couple of years, larger amounts. And because they all don't spend within the year that they were contracted, and you can only spend 15%, and the next year it rolls over. That's why this year we brought everything back down to a manageable number, so then the next year we can be a little more flexible with the 15% of program income.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, thank you. Great meeting too.
So,
I got to catch that last one, that third meeting you had, so thank you both.
Oh, yeah,
Being
you
willing
went
to
really
answer.
well.
Yeah.
Eric did a great job, I think, helping me because I didn't have all the answers.
There was a lot of questions that came through, so thank you.
Thank you.
this will be a public hearing tomorrow, is that right?
Yes.
All right, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item D, is downtown streetscape update. This time we'll recognize Todd Lambert, city engineer. Good evening, Todd.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We'll give you a pretty quick update on streetscape. And so just to remind you, when we came to you probably about a year ago now, we identified some streetscape elements to do in conjunction with the downtown water and sewer project. So we identified several intersections for increased curb extensions, to reduce crosswalks, raised intersections, replace existing sidewalk in a location where we were impacting water and sewer. So if you recall, that estimate at the time was $7.5 million total. We identified several different funding operations within the city to fund those. We followed that up with several public meetings, meeting with downtown groups, general public at large, to kind of see what they wanted to see in the streetscape. We brought you back this plan that was kind of throw everything at it that anybody asked for. So this is not necessarily a staff recommendation. This is if somebody asked for it, we put it on the plan, and to show you what that might look like. Things that were above and beyond the original scope were a roundabout at Worth and Main, and wider sidewalks pretty much in the entire district, including an expansion of the raised intersections at more than one location. Now, that was estimated to lose about 65 parking spaces downtown if you did everything that everybody asked for. Now, keep in mind, everybody didn't ask for the same thing, so some of the things that some people want were things that other people did not want. But again, this was if somebody asked for it, it showed up on this plan. Since then, our consultant has given us a plan of how that would fit with actual survey and engineering data. So all of that can work on the plan. This is what that would look like at various locations. And also the net result of that plan was 61 loss of parking spaces as opposed to the 65. The thing that we did finally get when they got engineering plans was a construction estimate. That was again far higher than the 7.5 that we originally estimated. And that actually come in, and with this estimate was almost $25 million. Again, staff kind of recognized this, that's well beyond what our expected budget is, so where can we start to trim this plan back that meets most of the goals that people ask for and fall within the budget. So areas that staff looked at reducing the scope from the grand master plan back to a reasonable plan were sidewalk locations that were adjacent to parking lots. So again, we didn't see the need to make a substantially wider sidewalk if the only thing you were serving were a parking lot adjacent to it. So those are a lot of these areas in red highlighted. The other large item that was really a bang for a buck in terms of savings was the keeping Main Street one-way traffic. So one of the requests was, on the original scope, was to make Main Street two-way. That still can be done in the future. Probably the biggest kind of thing that would be tied to is that in the future, if you ever looked at opening Main Street across Webb Avenue again, you would certainly want these two blocks to be two-way at that point in time. But what we would do with this plan will replace what is there along Main Street. It would not prevent you in the future from turning that into two-way traffic if that project ever went through. Of course, that project is going to be another $25 to $30 million project, so adding and reconfiguring these two blocks in is not going to be a detriment to that project in of itself. So keeping Main Street one-way traffic, eliminated 2 brand new signals, and eliminated third signal modification for Maple and Main. We also looked at this area along Davis and along Worth. Again, areas that are adjacent to parking lots, or areas that were adjacent to what is largely either a parking lot or the city annex building. So again, not a huge benefit to widen sidewalks in front of our property that's not really looking to do sidewalk events. Now, this plan, I'll highlight one of the biggest things is this gets back to a loss of 14 spaces overall downtown. Many of those are actually in conjunction with the Paramount project of increasing sidewalk there and taking away some of those 1 to 2 oddball spaces there on the corner that becomes not so conducive when you combine that with the Paramount project. But 14 spaces lost overall downtown. Talk about funding. We also looked at what is our anticipated funding for this project. We still kept the $7.5 million that was originally estimated and kind of those funding sources for the city. This includes now the $5 million that we have tagged on the general obligation bond. We have a $3.5 million federal request that is earmarked that we have not heard word from, but anticipating either part of that or other funding sources at the federal level, particularly with keeping the roundabout that our consultants and our city staff feel that would be a good candidate for additional funding as a transportation project, not as a streetscape project. And then we do have a $425,000 state grant that we've already been awarded for this project. So what staff felt is we can proceed with construction documents with these reduced items, and that can fall within what we feel now is our anticipated budget for this project. So this kind of gives you a look of what that project might look like. You have some printouts in front of you. But essentially what you have is the red dashed lines or existing curb lines. And then this shows you where areas could be expanded for sidewalk. So you'll notice around the Paramount itself, we have those spaces would be lost adjacent in front of the Paramount. But again, to provide that atmosphere and that entrance level to the Paramount itself. You'll notice areas on Main Street where, at least on the one-way sections, those go back essentially where they're at. We did find some locations that you could make some opportunities that you didn't have loss of parking spaces on the opposite side of the street that made sense. And we did have a couple of areas in front of some of the existing storefronts that are not Labcorp owned that can have some opportunities for wider sidewalks without losing any angled parking spaces on the opposite side of the street. We also kept the roundabout because that was one of the very large number of respondents on some of the surveys and some of the meetings. Really like that feature, so that feature remains as well. Doing estimates of where we're at right now, again, we feel like that this will be in the range of our anticipated funding. So the request tonight is more informal. Our next steps would be to have the consultant proceed with getting construction documents ready to bid out. This would be bid out post November election, so we knew exactly what our funding model was. And then that would go into, along with the same time that you were kind of getting the Paramount together post November election to figure out what your funding sources were, and getting those kind of put out to bid together so that they would be a tandem construction project. This will break the streetscape and water and sewer into two separate projects. Previously, we had looked at doing a single bid project for all of that work. With water and sewer still being tied to having to be under contract by the end of this year, that certainly doesn't make that feasible, that we can wait till November and figure out what your final funding is for streetscape and then try to bid something out and get it into contract within a month. So we have permits that have already been submitted to the state for the water and sewer. We are still looking on schedule for that to be bid out in the next month to 6 weeks, to where we would have time to be able to get that under contract and be well within the guidelines of that money requirement. That just means that it will be incumbent for our construction documents to be very clear on coordination of work, who's responsible for work, and how the contractors, with presumably being two separate contractors, are working in tandem with each other. Although that's not impossible, that just puts a little bit more work on our end to make sure that coordination happens up front. That's all I have to present. Certainly open to any questions, but again, right now we're just looking for a consensus to have the designers proceed with this overall design that matches our anticipated funding.
So Todd, reality, then you got one raised intersection underneath the intersection of Main and Front Street, right?
That's correct. I'm sorry I missed that point. The reductions were also going back from the 8 raised intersections back to the 1 that was originally identified.
So the roundabout piece on this is, first of all, I'm glad the public input was positive on that, because the way those intersections align, that is about the only proper fix.
It really is, unless you got into some serious property acquisition outside the property that the city owns. The way that we have the design kind of shifted, this would encroach onto some of the areas where we have some city art now, but that's city property, and so this design does not impact any private property owners to where you would need to take additional right-of-way. We would look at, you'll notice there's several large areas here that we could relocate the existing art to one of the other intersections, or we'll also be coming back as to what you may want to do in the center of that roundabout if you wanted art in the center of that feature itself.
Well, I guess my point with that is that really is a DOT project. We've got it into a streetscape project, but it is really a DOT project in the scheme of things. Could we pull that out and meet with our legislative contingency in Raleigh and just see if there's any DOT funding for any type of projects like that? See if we could get some.
I mean, it's not, it is city street. So, yeah, so I mean, it's worth a shot, don't you think, Mike?
Yeah, we can certainly ask them.
Yeah.
We can look for the traffic alignment issues
Yeah.
and just see if it's eligible, because it's something they can allocate money to.
Yeah, I just think pulling that out and, you know, and it doesn't, if you live in Burlington, any length of time, you know, the exact intersection.
Yeah.
So the visual helps us. I just think it would be worth asking as a separate.
I agree.
Yeah, we certainly can. I mean, I think for us, we would continue with the design to have it.
Absolutely.
And then we can identify that in the schematics and how we put stuff out. But again, that's one of the pieces that whether it was NCDOT or Federal Highway, we felt that there was probably a good candidate for other type of transportation funds as well, that we would continue to pursue.
And I agree.
And also with the streetscape and the Paramount, we're still continuing to look for options for funding and grants and still trying to get those earmarked for us as well. So that will not stop even if the bond is passed.
Okay.
Todd, what's the timeline on the replacement of the water and sewer lines? Have you even begun to imagine where to start we prioritize what's in terms of club sidewalk closures?
It's still going to be somewhat of a Webb Avenue down towards Moorhead. So again, we still anticipate water and sewer would start in the area along Front Street. You could get that completed and kind of out of the way so that when Streetscape and Paramount came in, you're getting that area set up to be completed first as you work from Webb towards Moorhead. Having two construction projects will change the impact to business owners. It's still going to be impactful. Ultimately, you're changing everything downtown. What this will allow it to do is, instead of being everything done block to block, you'll have water and sewer that's completed block to block, and then you will have streetscape that come in behind it. So instead of having the street closed and the sidewalk closed, now they can have the street closed, but get the streets back open, and then deal with individual sidewalk closures as they're coming through the streetscape project. So closures won't be complete, but they will certainly happen at two different times, but the two different times will be less impactful than the complete closure for the week or 2 weeks that they would have been working under a single contract.
So, if I'm not mistaken, you have utility lines in a majority of these sidewalks in the downtown area, do you not?
I don't know that there's laterals that run in the lines. The lines themselves are in the street, so between curb to curb.
Okay, how about the line that leads from the businesses to the street then?
Yeah, so every business will presumably have multiple services, both water and sewer that would be replaced. They also have power, gas, telephone as well. But our water mains and our sewer mains are in the street, but we will be replacing those, and then we will be replacing services laterals that go from those to each building.
Okay, any other questions?
So, for example, let's take a restaurant, one to start replacing those service laterals, that's a big deal. I would imagine then the concept would be, or certainly to try to give it advance notice.
There'll certainly be a lot of advance notice. There will be a lot of the work that becomes time-specific that the contractor will have to deal with. So again, there may be businesses that they're doing changeovers at night, and then there will be businesses that are doing changeovers during the day. And so again, then that's going to be affected almost block by block and business by business. So again, that restaurant, we would be looking at a service changeover night, late night or early mornings, because you certainly don't want to change over a restaurant service between 11 a.m. and 8 or 9 p.m. And similar to the insurance company that's open from 8 to 5. So there will be a lot of night work in this project when it comes to changeovers, because again, that's when it's most convenient for the business owners. A lot of the work in the streets themselves can happen during the day, and then there will be night work where they're doing tie-overs and working throughout the night to make those tie-overs, which is not unheard of in the water and sewer utility business. Even if we're replacing mains now, that we're doing new mains and we're doing tie-overs in intersections where we have to close down intersections, we will still do those at night on our construction projects for regular water and sewer replacements.
Anything else for Todd?
Okay, so again, consensus just to proceed in this model and work towards at least what we think our funding is now. And then we will continue to bring council updates on where we're at with that. We'll certainly ask for updates later on in the design process when it comes to the soft items, the trees, the planters, the benches, stuff like that. We're not there yet, but again, we're just trying to get that. That is included in the estimate for construction costs, and we just don't have those design details to show.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item, item D, is Burlington Fire Department 2023 Annual Report. to recognize Chief Matt Wallace. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mayor, member of council, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I know you've got a long plate. We have gotten to a point where we've gotten our 2023 annual report compiled and ready for presentation to the community. So we want to be with you tonight to give you a summary of that. You've got a printed package, printed copy in your package, but just wanted to present just some of the highlights of that report to you. So really, on our agenda tonight, just a brief overview of 2023. Really dealing with our service demands and trends. I've heard several questions from you guys over time about how many calls we run and those type of things. So I wanted to put the information in front of you so that you've got a good idea of what our service demands look like for the department. As well as talk about some of our achievements during 2023. Look forward just a little bit into 2024 and some things and changes that you'll see happening within the department, and then give you any opportunity for questions that you have. So again, this is our 2023 annual report. In total, it's about a 60-plus page document that you've got printed for you, I think electronically in your package, but we'll just do a summary of that tonight. After tonight, we do plan to make it public to our community, so we'll post it on our web page and Facebook page and social media. Really, it's just a way to keep our stakeholders informed and to be transparent about our operations and our activities. I will say a little more granular than the annual report. We do on a monthly basis have performance packages that are generated internally within the department that we share with the manager, just so that we can stay on top of our performance, and so that all that information is available to you at any point that you'd like to see that. We'll be involved in that. Before I get to, you'll see some other white shirts in the room. I've asked some of our senior staff to be here to bail me out if I get in trouble tonight. So thank you for being here. So just a little bit about our service demand trends. This is really information over the last 15 years as far as our service demands within the city. But for 2023, just a snapshot, just over 10,000 calls for service during the year of 2023. That's an average of about 27.5 calls per day. So our folks are really busy in and out of our stations serving our community. The call types that involves about 70% of those are EMS or medical type calls, and the balance 30% of that are fire calls and other hazmat calls and things built into that. The fire responses and EMS responses are two big categories. One thing I want to point out in the red, it's a little difficult to see, but over the last 15 years, how our call volume has changed. Our demand for EMS services has increased 50% over the last 15 years, and our fire demand has increased 66% over the same time frame, just to give you some idea of our growth. These will be a little bit difficult to see, but I just want to give you a snapshot of the kind of distribution of our emergency responses within the city. So each dot represents one or multiple calls for service by our department throughout the city. And very similar heat map, it kind of shows you, we're able to see on a monthly basis where our hot spots are, where our occurring calls are for us within the city. So you'll see our fire stations located there, as well as our service demands surrounding. So I want to talk a little bit about our response standards that we have set for ourselves and then how we are able to achieve those. In our response, there are several different components. The first is turnout time, so that's the amount of time it takes from the time we receive dispatch to the time we get on the fire truck and are rolling out the door to respond to that call for service. Our standards that we set for ourselves are 60 seconds for EMS-related calls, which we perform consistently in about 44 seconds from the time we receive that call to the time we're rolling out the door. And for fire calls, because we've got to put on additional gear before we get on the truck, that is an 80-second turnout time, and we do that very quickly too in about 40 seconds. So we're on average. So we are meeting our performance standards there. As far as travel time, that's from when we're en route to the time we arrive on the scene. We have to do that within 5 minutes anywhere within the city. And our performance average is about 4 minutes and 22 seconds. So internally, we do these are average numbers, so internally we do a 90th percentile, so we want to see 90% of the time how we're performing. So our internal numbers look a little different, but on average, we'll be anywhere within the city within 4 minutes and 22 seconds travel time. So realistically, our goal from anywhere, any fire station, from the time we get dispatched to be anywhere in the city is within 6 minutes and 20 seconds. We do that very well. And I just note that these standards that we've set for ourselves are best practices that are across national standards set by Center for Public Safety Excellence and National Fire Accreditation. So as we start moving the department towards accreditation, these are numbers and standards that we have set that we're already working towards. So here's a chart here just to give you some idea of the type of fire-related incidents that we respond to. A quarter of those false alarms, 9% fires, 36% good intent type calls where folks know they got an issue, like an investigation, they smell smoke, we get there and check it out. So just a variety of calls that we respond to, and that's the chart that represents that. So I want to give you some idea just about how the fire protection in the city of Bronzeville impacts our tax base. In 2023, we responded to 100 structure fires. 70, that was up from 77 in the prior year. 14 of those were in other jurisdictions that we responded out to help those other departments with. That leaves 86 that are within the city. That's about $15.75 million worth of property that were involved with the fire. So that if we respond to, we take an evaluation based on tax base. So we responded to almost $16 million worth of property last year. About 14.2 of that was saved, or damage was minimized. And as far as fire loss, about 1.5 million lost by fire within the city last year.
Is that rate fairly normal year to year, that percentage?
I have to go back and look at our prior annual reports, but I would say it's pretty similar. As far as fire impacts, unfortunately, we did experience 2 fire-related fatalities during this last year. One was on Queen Anne Street on November 22nd, just before Thanksgiving of last year. The other just before Christmas on South Madison Street. And that victim was rescued by our personnel, was transported to the hospital, and died several days later. So it was a successful rescue. Unfortunately, he had other health complications that just didn't allow him to survive that injury. EMS impacts, I think, are worth mentioning here. 73 cardiac arrest patients during 2023 that our folks provided aid to. Successful resuscitation of 13 of those patients post our interaction with them. 63 doses of Narcan for overdose patients were administered by our folks. 5 epinephrine injections for severe allergic reactions that, gone untreated, could, as you well know, move into something much worse. And then many other administrations of aspirin, glucose, and assistance with nitroglycerin and albuterol treatments to aid people on the scene before in pre-hospital setting. I'll point out this picture on the right. We love to see these. This is a gentleman who we responded to having a cardiac event. Our folks worked on this patient for some time before EMS arrived, got him to the hospital, underwent surgery, did really well. Several days after getting out of the hospital, comes back to our fire station and thanks our folks. So that's why we do it, is to get pictures just like this. As far as training, we've kind of changed our training model a little bit during 2023, and I'll talk a little about that. But in the first part of 23, we had one fire recruit academy with 3 new firefighters coming out of that. As we talked before, that's about a 14-week dedication to day-to-day training those new firefighters to get them certified and ready for service to the city. We also did a lateral class training of already certified firefighters that we brought in, about 2 weeks dedicated to that. And then in July, you remember, I was before you and talked with you about partnership with ACC for the apprenticeship program. That's when our kind of training model shifted a little bit. And we, at that point in time, you authorized us five positions to commit to that apprenticeship program, which has been very beneficial, and thank you greatly for that. So from that first class, we got that initial 5, and then based on vacancies, we had 3 other vacancies, so we hired a total of 8 that first class, and have continued that model. We have some that will finish up Fire Academy this next week. That'll be coming out of that program. As far as in-service training, just to give you some information, company level training, so the folks in the fire trucks training together, about 15,000 documented hours of training during 2023. Driver-specific training, 934 hours dedicated to making sure our folks are safe on the streets. Officer training, leadership, and development, professional development, things like that, almost 1,166 hours. Hazardous materials specific training, over 1,000 hours. Medical training, all of our personnel are certified to the emergency medical technician level standard. So we've got over 3,000 hours dedicated to maintaining those certifications and honing their skills there. And then almost 5,000 training hours performed at our training facility. So just to give you some idea why that's such an important asset to us and how our folks are using that. Just a reminder too, you've seen these information before, but just some advances in our training that we made during 2023 that we're proud of. The first was a project with, between us and LabCorp and ACC for the receipt of a retired Pilatus PC-12 airframe, which we have successfully set up at our training facility to orient our folks with aircraft and make them aware of the hazards that are going on at the airport and approaches and those type things, as well as the conversations and improvements that we've gotten for the partnership with ACC for the construction of the live fire training facility that is in the planning phases currently. Another division in our department, just to give you some detail about, is our Fire Prevention Bureau. Within the city during 2023, just over 2,100 fire inspections were conducted by the staff from that division, making sure that our commercial properties and apartments and people, places where people work, live, and play are safe for them to do that. That's a 10% increase from 2022, so the demand for those inspections is increasing. They also are responsible for fire investigations, which they conducted 14 during the year. 2 of those resulting in partnership with our police, our public safety partners in the police, in charge of the arson that came out of those investigations. And then, of course, public education and countless number of folks that we made contact with to make sure that they and their families are safe. A little bit about our budget. We were allocated $13.5 million in 2023, which represents about 33% of all city funds allocated toward public safety within the city. So just moving on now into our accomplishments. You guys are well aware of some of these, but I'll just reiterate them just a little bit. In July 2023, the Commissioner of Insurance was here and let us know of our achievement of an ISO Class 1 within the city, which became effective November 1, 2023. Represents the best possible fire protection possible. But I will say it's not only the fire protection. It includes an evaluation of our water system as well as our emergency communication system, all which come together to make sure that we have the tools and processes and things in place to make sure that we can show up and do our jobs. So we're really proud of that. It can, as you know, drive reduction in insurance premiums across the city. It can certainly serve as a driver for economic development. So I think that's just something just to highlight that we are doing all that we can to make us proud of the fire service that we have in the city. Again, the apprenticeship program, that was last July with the 5 approved positions. Again, thank you very much for that. Great success. It's improved greatly our applicant pool, our ability to recruit diverse applicants, and has certainly improved our staffing levels. In the term building that you're well as well. Looking forward just a little bit into 2024, we've got a 5-year strategic plan that expires in 24. So we will be moving into a new strategic planning process that we want you guys and our community to be very engaged with to help us shape the future of the Burlington Fire Department and give us some guidance and input on things that you would like to see us achieve over this year. So more information to come there. And this things, I mentioned this because you'll see part of this starting tomorrow night. We've got an item on the consent agenda for reclassification and kind of sets this reorganization into place. So I'll just give you some highlight about that. Really, we've historically been had a couple of divisions within the organization: fire prevention and fire suppression and training divisions. Those are really narrowly focused, and my goal is to kind of broaden our focus a little bit. So by doing that, by changing just some simple naming things from within the department, changing our fire suppression division to emergency response, because I've shown you that 70% of the calls they run are EMS related. So just kind of broaden that scope a little bit. And then transition our fire prevention division into a community risk reduction division, because they do great work with child passenger safety, fall prevention, lots of things that really just make sense and don't fit into a fire prevention budget. And to do that, again, tomorrow night you'll see an agenda item for reclassification of our vacant deputy chief position to an assistant chief of support services. That will be a new division for the organization that can really focus on some strategic things for us, like safety, training, professional development, recruitment, logistics, and accreditation. So again, you'll see that tomorrow in your packet. So that's what we got for you tonight. We thank you for the time and are here to answer any questions you may have for us.
Great report. Any questions, comments? No?
Turnover rate was last year, staffing. Much,
A lot. We started, we went the majority of last year at about a 10% vacancy rate. So that's about down 10 personnel. And we couldn't get people trained fast enough to overcome our attrition. That was really the intent of that apprenticeship program, is to allow us to stay ahead of that. And it has worked. When we graduate, this class that will graduate in July, we'll be to the good 3 positions. So we're in really good shape right now.
was that attrition, but mostly in terms of retirements or just?
It was a mix of both. We had a big class that started in 1995. That was the biggest class that the fire department's, other than when we opened Station 6, I think. That was a big recruit class. They all retired about the same time. It was a tough market to keep firefighters in, and we lost some to some other departments. But again, we solved that problem. We're in really good shape.
We had a situation, Chief, at our school, Burlington School, several months ago, and I have to applaud your group of guys that came out. They did a great job, communicated very well, and they did not leave until the building was secure and things were just like they wanted it. Not necessarily me, but them. So
Great to hear. We've got the greatest group of folks that you can ask for in the fire department, so we're real grateful. All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you. We appreciate everything you guys do. Thanks for being here. Item F, fiscal year 2024-2025 budget proposal presentation. This time we've got our city manager, Craig Honeycutt, and our CFO, Corey Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, and I appreciate the opportunity to present the proposed 24-25 budget. And again, we do have a theme for this year's budget, and it really is taking care of our assets. And our assets are not only the capital that we have, but it's our people as well. So we'll start off by looking at revenues. As Thomas, please make sure you get this first. No increase in property tax rate is recommended. However, we do have some new revenue with respect to the new municipal TDA occupancy tax. As you know, we've been working with Graham, Mebane, and Elon for a new municipal tourism development authority. So we have those funds included in this budget, which will start July 1. One of the things we have done is we have looked at, to help support public transit, is currently we have a $5 vehicle tax. In order not to have as large a transfer from our general fund to that fund, we're recommending a $5 increase on that as well. The other is our water and sewer rates. We're looking at a 5% increase. One of the things we really have talked about, especially with PFAS, especially in our drinking water, we originally were looking at a 4% increase. However, we're starting to prepare ourselves for some design work and really setting some money aside because we know that there will be a revenue bond coming up sooner rather than later to address our drinking water side, and we still have wastewater eventually we're going to have to deal with as well with PFAS and chemicals. But again, taking care of our existing assets for our spending, inflationary costs, and we're talking inflationary as well. Again, fuel, utilities, just the cost of basic contracts have gone up as well. Again, retaining our employees. We really consider our employees our biggest asset. 72% of this budget goes towards benefits and salaries for our employees. So again, they are the biggest assets that we have to provide services to our citizens, but limiting operational increases. With trying to keep the tax rate not to be increased, we have cut back and tried to limit operational increases as much as possible, really going back and making sure that our departments are in good shape and really right-sized where they should be. And again, we also have some deferred maintenance that we're trying to address as well. Just an economic update, kind of looking at unemployment rate, and again, every time we have a new employee orientation, I thank the employees who have come and thank them for choosing the city of Burlington. Because at 3.5% unemployment, people have options where they want to work. So we are very thankful for our employees, very appreciative of our employees. But again, we know that we have to look after them as well since unemployment is so low. Again, with respect to CPI, we're still having inflation, a little bit more than last year, not as much as in 22, but we're seeing a steady increase in inflation. Again, this is an overall general summary of our general fund. We're looking at about $40.3 million. We're looking at a 2% tax growth in our property valuation. And again, that's from growth and that's from new things. And this is about standard from what the city has seen historically. Sales tax, we're looking at a 3% increase. Again, we're being very conservative in this estimation as well, as we've seen sales tax actually took a dip the prior month from previous years. So we are still seeing growth, but we're still being very conservative with respect to that growth as well. And then the $750,000 is our new Municipal Tourism Development Authority. This is our share that we're projecting with Burlington, Elon, Graham, and Mebane. Again, payroll, police department, we've had some, in the past we looked at vacant salaries, so we're having to add that back in. Payroll and all others, which includes merit, public safety, DI, that's police and fire, and also trying to implement our pay and class study is a $1.2 million increase. Again, and a $0.2 million increase for new positions. And then operational, as I mentioned, we have some non-controllable increase in cost. Anything from cost in IT, where contracts have increased by 10%, or cost on some leases that we really have no choice for, that we've had to increase in this year's budget, but that was $2.3 million. One of the things we've had to do to look at Decreasing operational costs was we did not increase travel and training this year. It is the same level as last year. And again, looking at capital outlay, we're doing some pay-as-you-go, $700,000. We're going to finance about $3.3 million. But again, unfunded, we have $14.6 million as far as the request from department heads. So we're trying to chip away with it as much as we can. Again, this is for our general fund, looking at our revenue. The top three represent 84% of our revenue stream. That is sales tax, permits and fees, and property tax. Then we have state share, fund balance usage, and then all others. And again, spending, our top five is 76%, police, fire, public works, recreation, and debt service. And then everything else is 20.4%, or 24%, excuse me. This is how we have it broken down, the $85 million in our general fund by department. Again, police, fire, public works, and then it goes all the way down to economic development. Again, these are some of the operating details. I won't read all that out to you, but we've had some increase. Like I mentioned before, our contracts have increased, landfill and tipping have increased, fuels increased, utilities have increased. So we've also added professional services for pickleball, which is new. Hopefully we will be talking about a contract at our next meeting to look at a company to help us manage our new facility. Again, we have had a lot of funding requests. If you look at 3 out of the 4 positions here that we are recommending that we add to the budget, they are partially funded by other areas. The Community Support Coordinator for Animal Services, as you're aware, we do get revenue back from our municipal partners as well as the county, so they help offset that cost. We've also changed a part-time GIS technician to a full-time position, and we will start that as of January 1. The TDA marketing coordinator, this will be paid for 75% with TDA funds, our tourism dollars, the new dollars, and 25% for recreation. And the IT systems engineer, this has been a position that IT has requested at least the past 6 years. With all the new computers that we're having, the new technology we're having, we really are putting a huge workload on our IT staff. So we have recommended to fund that position as well, but again, funding it for a half a year starting January 1. But you can also see some of the positions we did not fund are on the right: a part-time affordable housing technician, athletic maintenance groundskeeper, community engagement technician, and the other position that IT requested was an IT business analyst.
And Craig, that number that you're seeing over there, that is with benefits, that's just
Yes,
the
sir.
salary.
Oh, yes, sir. That is with benefits. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Again, on water resources, we have $35.3 million. You can see where the major of our revenue come from, and also our spending, shared resources, water, sewer, debt service, and then our lakes and marinas. And again, if we are looking at the 5% increase with respect to our water and sewer, what does this mean to our citizens? This is a typical 2,500 gallon a month usage. The cost per day would increase, or right now it's about $1.54. The cost per day would increase by 5 cents. And this is how we compare based to other municipalities our size. And as you can see, we are very low with respect to what we charge for our water and sewer. So that's a good comparison.
This one right here shows that we are really at the very bottom of what other local governments are charging for water and sewer services compared to everybody else within our state.
And then this is water resources spending by department, everything from each plant to our sewer, to lines, maintenance, upkeep. So that's how we've had that broken down. Again, our stormwater, we're keeping it right now at the $7 per month as far as the charge. And again, that's something we will be coming back and looking at a later time with our fees and services, is that stormwater fee. So just to let you know, that is coming. But one of the things that we work with, and I appreciate Bob's help with this as well, one of the things that the city has really been focusing on has been our litter issue. And we've been looking at how we could really be more proactive with respect to litter control within the city of Burlington. And as council is aware, we recently did an employee cleanup. Friday was 2 weeks ago. I want to thank Gary and Bob and Amy Barber for coordinating that. So it really went well. But we really want to be very proactive with litter control within the city. So within stormwater, we are looking at adding a new position and a vehicle that will help us coordinate and be a little bit more proactive to work with Public Works as well for litter. Again, then we have our public transportation fund at $3.4 million. Again, that's how we get our revenues. 66% from the federal funds, and again, 7% comes from our general fund. But spending, we spend $3 million on operations and about $400,000 on capital.
So 7% of the general fund.
Yes, sir.
Roughly around approximately 200,000.
And these are the other funds that we have, the Controlled Substance Abuse, the RICO, the MPA Fund, Guilford McIntosh, Water Capital Reserve, Sewer Capital Reserve, and our Municipal Service District. And again, these are all funds total. As you can see, adding all those funds together, the city has a $128 million budget. And what we would like to ask and request is, we're proposing the public hearing be set for June 4th. And again, we can approve the budget anytime after the public hearing or at that evening. But this will be for a fiscal year starting July 1.
Questions, comments? I've got two things I'd like to revisit between now and June 4th, or get some feedback from council. One is, obviously, we've been working with HUD on this housing consortium. Still no letter, right?
Still no letter. We've reached out to our consultant and haven't heard anything yet.
And we're in the midst of you're doing a study so we can truly identify.
We're in the process now. Jamie is doing a great job of, we're trying to find, number one, what we can afford, because it really does vary about the amounts that people are willing to do. So we're really trying to narrow focus, really to find out what our housing needs are in Burlington. Because what affordable housing is in Burlington may be different from what affordable housing is in Greensboro.
Exactly.
So we're trying to define that, and hopefully we'll be bringing you something summer that we can start looking at what we can help define that with.
I guess my point behind all that is we've got a request for a part-time affordable housing technician at $27,000. I'd like to see us, personally would like to see us work that into the budget, because this issue is not going to get less impactful. it's only going to get more impactful. And I know we've got existing staff trying to cover current needs, and then we've got this emerging need. And I'm just afraid we're going to get spread a little thin. And we're doing all this work, putting all this effort, but we're going to need a person that can help us coordinate this. And to me, that's a reasonable request. I'd just like to get some counsel.
I'm certainly in favor of it, because I think we need it, and I think it'll go a long ways in helping us identify what we need to do.
Yes, sir.
Thinking about affordable housing, but I'm in full support of that. It's not that much money
Yes, sir.
that the world turns, and
Yes, sir.
I think it's needed.
What department is that going to be in?
It would be in planning. And again, and I appreciate the work that Jamie has done and Lee has done, but part of our issue is we don't have capacity. And this would help us with capacity to help us really get a better handle on what we need to do moving forward, especially with HUD and the proposed home consortium as well.
And that's a part-time position?
Yes, sir.
That 27,000 equals how many hours a year?
1,090. 4 times 1,080.
So it's 12, okay. So do you think you can attract somebody for that salary and that position?
We're hoping so. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why we've contracted so much with PTRC on housing, is we just haven't been able to find the capacity for staffing. So, but this would start, Jamie, did you want to?
I don't think I need to add more than, this is what we feel an emergent need, and a dedicated staff person to assist specifically with this task as we move forward and identifying our needs, our wants, where our gaps are. So I appreciate the consideration.
Well, the real question would be, does it need to be full-time versus part-time, or part-time to get it started?
That's what we originally had the discussion, was part-time to get it started, especially wanting to understand what the actual need was, and maybe after our study comes back, we'll have a better handle on that in data.
And my point is, if we're going to do this, if it's and really try to do it, obviously, what's the total budget? $128 million. Then we find a few more $1,000 on $128 million, make sure we get the right person to job.
Right.
My point is, just don't screw it up before we start.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And also, for that number, the only benefit is probably the Social Security tax.
There's no benefits.
Or the benefits.
So this is a contract position.
Pardon?
It's a contract position or just part-time?
No, it would be an employee, but they would be working 20 hours or less a week.
So
So we would only have to pay Social Security on it.
It's not a benefit.
No retirement,
Yes,
no
sir.
insurance, none of the other.
Well, that's one I think we just need to keep our hands on, as, because there's probably nothing else we've talked about today that's more emergent than that.
Yes, sir.
I think it helps us get a good handle on it a little more. There's a whole lot more I don't know than I do know about that, and we certainly need some assistance in that area.
So Peggy, you said 1,040 hours a week, a year?
Yes.
Well, it has to stay under 1,000 hours a year, else we would have to contribute to the retirement system, and that would add another piece, another benefit. So we budgeted it at 19 hours a week technically, is what we try to encourage staff to, at part-time. That way we stay under the 1,000 hours and not have to add any other benefits to it.
I think my question is, can we get a person for that kind of money?
If we can't, we'll come back and let you know.
There's no reason to go in there and just
Right.
don't do it
Right.
halfway, do it halfway.
Yes, sir.
And that's not accomplishing anything.
And
That's not about
also-
tons of extra money either.
And also, council passes, as the state statutes require, council passes the budget at department level. So Jamie has a total department amount, and so there usually is some funds within that she can work with. But if we need to come up with a budget amendment to get the right person, we certainly will.
I agree with you, Earl. I mean, let's do it right, and take a little more money on something new.
This is not, we're not talking about department budget, we're talking about $27,000 out of $128 million.
Right.
Okay, good, thanks. The other thing is Harold and I, along with David, Huck, and Craig, we met with our downtown corporation board last week before last week. Obviously, we've got some transitions, some staffing changes. I think what we came out of that meeting realizing is that there's been some communication gaps and nothing contentious, but there are some items that the downtown corporation would like to work on, and we explored their ability to fundraise if they wanted to, which I think we determined they can do that on their own because they're a 501c3. But one of the things that they worked hard on was to develop a pocket park concept. And I think they came to us with kind of that idea. They really didn't know how to ask us for help with a specific thing. Do they need to create a budget for that? And what we basically said is just communicate with us. So we've asked them to come to work sessions and just give us updates. Because quite honestly, our last work session was the first update I've heard in quite some time. But this pocket park concept that they came up with was about $300,000. So in the grand scheme of things, I'd like to see us put about half that money aside and let them do their fundraising and let them get their other half through any grants or other contributions that they may see. Because we've got all these things going on, but that board is relevant. That board is extremely relevant to downtown, and we've got to support them. And I think that would go a long ways to maybe getting them a little motivated to go out and really start trying to enhance some of the things that they've got direct control with.
Or buying.
Yes.
It was the turnout was really good.
We didn't have any extra change.
I will say that.
So, you know, again, our budget, I think we can put that in this budget. Certainly, our revenues, I think we're going to be fine. But if everybody would agree, I'd like to see that put in.
How would that work again? Now, I'm in favor of it, you put aside that, but they'd have the burden of raising the other 150, right?
Correct.
That's
And then we would, you know, we would set it aside, and then when they get their other monies raised, we'd release the funding.
I think it's good, and I think it's a fair approach.
Is everybody good with that?
Well, I don't know.
Any other public comments or comments tonight on this budget? I know there's probably going to be some more discussion between now and June 4th.
Mayor, if I can mention it as well, tomorrow night we're going to have on the consent agenda approval for ARP policies. We really haven't spent ARP dollars for grant dollars before. That will be required for the water and sewer. So you will see, I don't know how.
I want to clarify, we came to you with the city was allocated 11.5 million directly for the ARPA, and we chose to spend that money on public safety salaries and COVID-related expenses. There were not any construction expenses in those dollars. Now that we're getting the 10 million from the state for the water and sewer lines downtown, there are other policies that we need to adopt at this time. We didn't bring those to you before because we weren't spending the money in those ways. But tomorrow night, there's quite a chunk of policies on the consent agenda.
And as Todd said, since we have to have these funds allocated by the end of the year, we need the policies in place before we bid it out.
That might be a good idea.
Yes, sir.
You think?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on that?
item G, there's a voluntary contiguous annexation request, 3843 Greason Lane, which is parcel ID 106051. I think Jamie Lawson, our planning director, James will walk us through this.
Yes, good evening. Thanks again for your support. Just pull up the maps and we'll get going. Okay, so the first item is a request for an annexation. This parcel is roughly 70 acres in size. This accommodates an existing approved development that went through the TRC already for 343 single-family attached units. This is Greason Lane, just east of McIntosh, on the west side of Putnam Mill Road, and this is Harris Road right here. The existing city limits is shown in kind of this lime green color. So the property is contiguous to existing city limits. The annexation would enable the development to occur, provide the water and sewer connection, and included in your packet, there's the fiscal impact analysis provided. Staff is recommending the annexation, and included for tomorrow night would be a resolution to set a public hearing date for May 21st for a public hearing for the annexation request. This is a cover sheet, hard to read, but a cover sheet of the approved TOC plan. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions on this? Okay. How many homes again?
343.
So we'll put, that's going to be an add-on for tomorrow to set a deadline. Yep.
Yes, sir.
Or make it the first. Everybody good with that? All right. And next we've got boards and commissions. You're going to answer that?
Yes. The first request, so the Planning and Zoning Commission heard two items at their April 22nd meeting. The first was a rezoning request to change an existing property, which is the Sheets convenience store, gas station, just west of Home Depot on Alamance Road. The request essentially is to facilitate a brand new Sheets. Their intention is to tear down the existing building and completely start over from scratch. They are proposing also to add a drive-through to the facility as well. In order to facilitate this new opportunity, they had two options: to amend the existing conditional zoning for the property, or to change the zoning, to seek to change the zoning to accommodate a UDO-specific zoning designation. And we worked with them the staff recommended to go the UDO compliant route. They did not feel there would be any issue in terms of that. Sometimes, as you know, our conditional rezonings from the past are so specific that it's almost impossible in some cases when you're trying to modernize a site to take steps backwards to try to be zoning ordinance compliant. So I'm happy to answer any questions related to that, but this is really a request that's coming through Sheets to facilitate their new development, like what they did in Mebane, tear down their existing building and then start over.
I'm assuming they're not going to redo the pumps or anything like that. They're in the ground.
The pump locations may change slightly. I mean, we don't have a site plan that's tied to this rezoning request. So they will come through the TRC process, just like anyone else. And then we'll be looking at, you know, where the drive-through is going to be located and the overall build-out of the site. So the details in terms of the overall modifications, I can't report to you at this point, but
It's expensive.
It must be a pretty good idea because the business they have, which is pretty strong.
yeah.
Any idea how long it's going to take them to do all this?
I'm not sure exactly, and I know from personal experience, the one in Mebane seemed to move pretty quickly. It doesn't really change the appearance of the building all that much. I mean, they have a brand, they have a design that they work with. The floor plan is different than what exists now, from what I can tell on the other site. But really, I think the big change would be also for the drive-through. So there's already,
I'm sorry.
there's already infrastructure in that area. There's already, you know, sort of a built environment, so.
Do they have, are there going to be any interference with DOT and the Alamance Road?
Well, so I've chatted with Nolan about this. Now, you gotta keep in mind, DOT, how long have they been, this project, Alamance Road has been on hold for a while? Because of funding. Just like the interchange at Huffman Mill Road and Church Street, Shadowbrook, that got put on hold because of funding. Well, in the length of time that one was put on hold, there was a Publix bill that they didn't even factor in because they used the same engineering that they had done before. So with this project right here, Nolan and I met with them a few weeks ago, there's going to be, so is it Heather Road, is that what?
Mm-hmm.
Heather Road is going to be I guess a right in, right out. There will be a median there. So for someone to take a left, they've got to use this little Sheets Way right here now and come out to the light. And whatever happens right there is if it dumps those people out, now you've got folks that are trying to get out and take a left, have got to use, and that's a really tight, it's almost a residential road that is now going to become thoroughfare. And I think it's really important that we communicate all of this really well, because if their site is changing and they could be impacted by Alamance Road, to Ronnie's point, which they may use that back Sheets Way even more than what they intend for it to be used now, but it is pretty dangerous right now. That one's going to be a mess. And I think it's just going to be real important we over-communicate what we're doing to that little throttle area right there.
And they have been made aware, they have been put on notice regarding the anticipated project. So even before the rezoning, we're trying to communicate up front that there may be some challenges.
And I think, as staff communicated with the DOT, that could possibly be some changes. I mean, everybody's got to be in on this.
I don't know that, DOT sits in on our PACs, and
Okay.
so they're aware, they're communicating internally.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, that's the big thing, is just so that everybody knows, because that one's going to be significant.
So the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended in favor of this request 6-1. Staff also recommends the rezoning request as well. Okay. Any questions on this one? So then we had a second rezoning request. I'll just say that at this point, we don't have a public hearing recommendation because the applicant is making some, according to what they indicated, they're making some modifications. So this is just a general overview provided to you at what was on the Planning and Zoning Commission's agenda. So this is University Drive, Rural Retreat, Williams Mill Road. This property, the development is known as Sycamore at Burlington. The applicant it's currently zoned medium density residential. The applicant has come in with a request for a planned development for multifamily apartment style buildings. They have provided, similar to other planned developments, this is a little bit different than the limited use and the regular rezonings. They've come in with a master plan or a concept plan. It's not really all that clear. I have other versions that I can pull up if you need to see something more specific. But they've, on their concept map, they've shown generally, now we all know that things can potentially change from a concept plan, but generally the locations of the buildings are shown on the property. They've also provided commitments which go above and beyond our ordinance requests for buffering, for landscaping. They have exceeded in number improvements to the building above and beyond the residential design standards. They have dedicated an area for a right-of-way in the event there will be a connection to university to facilitate improvements, transportation improvements in the future, as well as a dedicated sidewalk that would connect across to Davidson Park. So they're doing both. They have proposed to do both on-site and off-site improvements to facilitate this development. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not recommend this rezoning request. It was 4 in favor and 3 against. There were
4 in favor to deny?
To deny.
Okay.
Yep.
With the, for to deny it.
It was a motion to deny. Yeah.
With these changes, will they go back to P and Z now?
It really depends. So we have what's considered administrative, minor changes, no changes to the overall density, no changes to the general street layout, other minor modifications. That can all be done through an administrative modification and wouldn't necessarily even have to go back through the technical review committee. But where we would deem things to be more significant, then it potentially could go back to the TRC for review and back through the Planning and Zoning Commission. So at this point, I don't have a revised plan to present or to tell you. We're waiting to hear back from the applicant on that. They've also committed during the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting to have a neighborhood meeting, another neighborhood meeting, and enlarge their notification radius to include a wider range of people even outside of our required notification area. There were concerns about increased buffering, building heights, and so I think the applicant is taking all of those different things into consideration and looking at ways that they can modify that.
Is that Waterford right there?
Yes.
Is that a street?
Yes. Another commitment that's already been agreed to is no connection to Limerick. That's Limerick Road there.
How do we feel about that as a staff? Because at one time, we were trying to connect everything.
Yeah, ideally you want the connections, but we definitely would like to have, 2 access points to this type of development. And our UDO allows us to have to count as one of those 2. So they're satisfying the ordinance. I think if you show the connection there, you may have some additional, I think they were trying to anticipate additional resistance to the project by not showing a connection there.
Right. I get that, but I know
to Abington Way, you know, that ties into that vacant land there, and you've got connectivity.
Yeah. Jamie, can you have a bigger picture, give us a more overview of that area so we can define? I'm just trying to say specifically what this is going to be at. Davidson Park
Where
is,
is going to
okay, where's that? I mean, Davidson Park is where now?
It is over in this area.
So this is really to the west, right, of Davidson Park?
Yes,
That's
correct.
yes.
Directly across, to the west.
Most of Taylor Brook, across the university.
Here.
Okay. Okay, so it's really, if you're going down the university, going towards the corridor, it's going to be to your right then. You're going out to 85.
Say that
If
again.
you're going down to university,
Mhm. If you're going down towards the shops,
Yes.
it will be on the right
right,
hand side.
okay,
There's two parcels that are privately held along University that are not part of their proposal. So it's the land immediately behind that.
okay.
It's
Okay.
fair, you know, it's fairly wooded there.
Yes, yeah.
Show where we.
Williams Mill Road is right here, so Rural Retreat comes down, and then you would turn right
That's the only outlet right now.
on Williams Mill.
The University Drive outlet is not going to be built by this developer. It's going to be partially built and then completed by somebody else, hopefully.
They're dedicating right of way.
Yeah.
That's
Still,
that is
initially,
part of the proposal.
Initially, the only outlet will be on Williams Mill. Williams Mill, we'll get into Williams Mill.
How does that impact in terms of public safety, especially fire and traffic?
So the TRC includes the fire department, police, emergency services. This will be fully reviewed once the rezoning request is either approved or denied and that project would move forward. So then they would go back through the TRC for a dedicated site plan, which would take into consideration all of that. They have reviewed this concept map, though, from a conceptual basis, and have not identified, any major issues.
So,
I will say that state fire code requires based on number of units, certain number of ingress egress. So that'll be something that we would look at.
I mean, it looks to me like you would almost have already been together.
They don't control,
What'd you say, no?
they don't control that property right here, so they can't, if they did, that would have been a requirement, but they don't control it. So, providing a stub is allowing you to get your second point access to be done.
So when that other piece comes before us, that's when we would
Yes.
finish.
Yeah, and that's why we asked them to provide some additional property here, because this stem is really short. So that allows you to kind of extend that a little further. And you might even be able to do a roundabout. We don't know exactly what it would be in the future, but it's setting you up with some opportunities, and they were willing to concede to that, to enhance their plan development.
So what does it do? 2 years ago, our concept was connecting back across to Springwood.
Yeah, so that's the rural retreat extension, which if you can zoom out.
It's getting us in that direction.
That's what I'm saying.
Is basically that comes down here and comes all over the.
Now, I'm just saying, that was something we envisioned many, many moons ago.
So, like I said, at the applicant's request, they have not asked for this item to be put on a public hearing date. They're going to be making some modifications, and depending upon what they are, I will either report back to you at a subsequent work session, or we'll be going back to the planning and zoning commission.
Okay. Very good. Any other, Kenzie?
No.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Mayor. I do want to thank my students. Meanwhile, you did attend tonight, so I think everybody else left. But I do want to thank Tony and his group and Kevin and everybody for the work that went into the Carousel Festival over the past weekend under less than ideal circumstances. It really was a wonderful event, and I do want to thank fire department, police department, public works, everybody who was involved. Tony, if you wanted to say anything about it as well. So,
Don't forget Rachel.
and Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel.
Unfortunately, weather is uncontrollable, and we got rain both Saturday and Sunday. We made the best of it. I can't compliment my staff enough that they worked hard to get everything in place that we could do in place. And for most of the major parts of the Carousel Festival, we had at least part of it. The vendors on the field, food trucks, all the rides were operating. The concert, the headline concert, Chase Bryant, at 6 p.m. on Saturday went on. Unfortunately, the crowds were not anything near what we usually have at the Carousel Festival when we have a nice weekend, but it is what it is. But a lot of people did show up and enjoy what we had, and I'm just sorry the weather didn't cooperate.
Maybe next year.
That's correct. Maybe next year.
But it wasn't going to cost them. So just want to thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's all I have, Mayor. That's all.
Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Yeah, you get extra points. You get extra points for staying on.
Yeah, she deserves a name. Something up like that. Okay,
So it's going to be done